Tonight, we will have a full breakdown of the 2016 election. I'll interview the president of the Skyworks project here at SU, and later on, we will fill you in on all the biggest international stories. This is Talking Points. Welcome to the February 11th edition of Talking Points. I'm your host, Alex Amico. The results are in from the first in the nation primary, New Hampshire. On the Republican side, Donald Trump more than doubled the second place vote, finishing with 35% compared to John Kasich's 16%. The rest of the top five followed as Ted Cruz, Jeb Bush, and Marco Rubio. On the Democratic side, Democratic Socialist Bernie Sanders defeated former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton by 22%. After the break, we will speak to the panel of journalists who covered the New Hampshire primary live on the ground. Talking Points will be right back.
Staring contest!
You still got it. I know.
Come alive with the forest. Visit discovertheforest.org to find a forest near you.
So, I just moved in with this family, and it's embarrassing. The little one, he likes to go outside and crawl around in the giant litter box. I don't know what he's doing. I mean, I was born and I knew how to use the litter box.
I was unprepared for this.
Look at that. That's disgusting. Oh, poop already. You're making me nervous. Oh, okay, I can't look at this anymore. I really hope he grows out of this, for his sake.
If you want to be a parent, it doesn't matter how you play or even what you wear. You just need to be there. Thousands of teens in foster care don't need perfection. They just need you.
Welcome back and welcome to our New Hampshire primary panel. Monica Hammer covered the Chris Christie campaign, Josh Bazan followed Marco Rubio, and Josh Carney was all over New Hampshire. Here they are to break down the results and preview the rest of the election. Welcome, guys. So, Monica, I want to start with you because in addition to Chris Christie, I know that you also were following Hillary Clinton. In the last few days of the race, what was her tone like? Was she setting up for a loss? Was she still pulling out all the stops, or what was her strategy look like?
You know, I think it was tough for Clinton because they were in the neighboring state of Bernie Sanders, right next to Vermont. So I think it was tough for her, and she knew that going into it. There was a huge gap in the polls, and I think she was really just trying to close that gap, which I don't think she was very successful in doing. And
Josh, now we know that Rubio had a chance to put away the rest of the establishment candidates in this race. It did not happen after a pretty disastrous debate performance. You were at the Rubio headquarters on election night. What was the mood like in that room?
I mean, the crowd was excited. They were very disappointed once the results started coming in. So it was a big change once those results started coming in. And then when Rubio took the stage, it was the first time he acknowledged that he did have a poor debate performance. Before that, he was saying, I would pay to have my debate performance replayed again and again on TV. Totally changed that night when he realized that it did hurt him in New Hampshire. It really affected his results. So you know, the whole campaign seems to be changing a little bit as we're moving forward now.
And other Josh, you were at Rubio's last rally in New Hampshire. Hearing what Josh said about what his mood was like on election night, what was his mood like compared to that at his last rally?
Well, his last rally was sort of his last effort in New Hampshire, and you could really tell that. He was pretty winded, and it didn't seem as if there was much left. And I like the way Dana Bash phrased it, is that it was a human moment for somebody who was accused of not being very human. He took responsibility for it, he moved on, and that's about all he could do. But it was definitely a dull mood at that last rally.
Now, Monica, I want to ask you this, and anyone else can jump in with your own view. Who do you think was the biggest surprise of this primary?
I think the biggest surprise is how poorly Rubio ended up doing. I think after the debate, Christie's attacks on him during the debate really hurt his campaign, and he didn't end up doing nearly as well as expected.
Right, and you mentioned Christie. You were following him around the state. What were his last few days like? How often did he hammer his performance against Rubio in the debate? What was his strategy like?
I really think that New Hampshire was the last effort, clearly, for Christie, and he was really pushing to have as many town halls, get to meet with people as much as possible. He was there longer than any other candidate, and he was really hammering in that idea that the person who ends up being the nominee needs to have that experience, needs to be able to deal with issues, and that's what he was really claiming, that Rubio wasn't fit for the job.
And Josh, we got to talk about Donald Trump. I know you got into a Trump event. Just tell me what it was like. What was it like inside a Trump event?
It was almost surreal. Going to all the other political rallies throughout the week, they're smaller, they're a little more formal, and then you go to Donald Trump had a rally at a hockey arena, and half the arena was curtained off for his rally, and he filled it up to the top of the bleachers, thousands of people there, and it felt almost more like a concert, like a performance. He did his typical Donald Trump. He went on what seemed like an unprepared rampage or an unprepared tangent, but the crowd loved it. They were cheering and chanting for him the whole night. It was a very different feel than you would get from the other candidates.
And as far as the second place finisher, Ohio Governor John Kasich, he staked pretty much his entire campaign on New Hampshire. He's managed to stay alive. He's a lot more moderate than most of the Republican candidates going into Super Tuesday, which is the so-called SEC primary. So, Josh Carney, Can Kasich make it to the Midwest where he actually has a chance at winning some significant delegates?
Kasich can if he gets the money to do it. He doesn't have the resources or the capability to get him there right now, and it's pretty scary for the GOP establishment, seeing that the candidates who have the ability to get there as of right now, in terms of resources, being Cruz and Trump and pretty much Bush, it's going to be a very weird race as it turns out, because Kasich, while his ideas and his moderate energy in New Hampshire might resonate with those voters, he was running for president of New Hampshire for the past few weeks, considering that was where he put all of his eggs in one basket. So we have to see if he has the ground force and he's able to mobilize his campaign.
And looking directly ahead for the Republicans, the next time Republicans head to the polls is for the South Carolina primary. Who's in the best shape to do well there?
Well, it seems as if the Bush family is always in the best shape to do well in South Carolina, but we really have to see what will come from the debate performances. We got to see if Rubio can pick up the slack, if Cruz can regain that momentum, and if Trump is able to sustain his position as it sits right now. But Jeb Bush definitely has a huge ground force, so it should be pretty competitive.
Now, moving over to the Democratic side, Monica, I want to ask you, what can we expect from tonight's debate between Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton? The campaign tone has taken sort of a nasty turn in the last few days. They've been pulling out all stops against each other. What are you expecting from both candidates tonight?
Well, I think that Clinton now knows after New Hampshire she really needs to be reaching out to the younger voters. Bernie has that clearly taken, and that's where she's struggling. She's struggling to reach out to these younger voters, so it'll be interesting if there's any way that she can do that in the debate tonight, any way that she can connect with a younger audience.
And Josh, you were at a Sanders event, so similar to the Trump event on the opposite side of the spectrum. Describe for me what that was like.
It felt like a rock star was coming through Manchester. He had an unbelievable amount of young people there who were so supportive, and going from a Sanders rally to a Rubio rally, it just showed a very sharp contrast in terms of how his voters interact and how they support him. They're 100% without a doubt not in question, whereas a lot of people at other rallies I noticed were either unsure, or they were there to find out more, or there were even protests within the rally like we saw at Rubio. Sanders was a classic stump speech for him. He continued for 45 minutes. Everybody else's was much more quick. So Sanders invested a lot in Manchester, but he knew how to do it in the right way. And he played to not only his base, but his base of voter types. He played to a younger population, and he played to a very exciting crowd. So he really worked it very hard in Manchester, and he was able to come out on top.
And Josh, the New Hampshire primary, while it didn't call the herd quite as much as the Republican establishment might have hoped, Carly Fiorina and Chris Christie did drop out after the primary. Who do you think we can expect them to endorse, and will it make any difference?
I mean, it's tough. You expect Christie to endorse one of the other governors. Possibly Jeb Bush. He seemed to be getting along with Jeb Bush in the last week in New Hampshire. They both seemed to be ganging up against Marco Rubio. So you expect Christie to endorse one of the other governors. As for Carly Fiorina, it's really a toss-up. I'm not sure who she would back up.
Now, Monica, the next time that the Democrats go to the polls, it'll be in Nevada. Now, Nevada is it might be a little bit more sympathetic to Bernie Sanders. It's a caucus. The electorate is mostly white, and the biggest population of minorities is Latinos, where Hillary Clinton's lead is not nearly as overwhelming as it is with black voters. What can we expect from Nevada in a couple weeks?
I think we're really just going to have to wait and see what happens if Clinton changes up her campaign at all after what happened in New Hampshire and not doing nearly as well as she would have liked to. So we'll just have to see if those Sanders supporters are as high as they were in New Hampshire, or if it's changing and it's going to be going for Clinton that time.
Monica Hammer, Josh Bazan, and Josh Carney, thank you so much. Coming up after the break, the latest on the Syracuse University drone policy. Stay with us.
Thank you. You got a king?
Go fish!
The smallest moments can have the biggest impact on a child's life. Take time to be a dad today.
Jimmy can't sing, and Tommy can't dance, so we're gonna put some ants in their pants. Aww.
Kids will spend 22 minutes watching us, the super duper party troopers, sing about ants in their pants.
Isn't that funny? Ants in their pants, they got ants in their pants, they've got ants in their pants.
Brushing for 2 minutes now can save your child from severe tooth pain later. 2 minutes, twice a day. They have the time.
Welcome back. It's a bird, it's a plane, it's a drone, but maybe not for much longer. Talking Points correspondent Molly Smith tells us why the university is drafting a ban on the use of drones on campus.
Thanks, Alex. While SU may have recently pushed into the top research tier among all doctoral universities in the country, its proposed ban on the use of drones may have you question the school's ranking in emerging technologies. The Office of the General University Counsel is currently drafting a set of rules regarding drone use on campus with the help of the Public Safety Department as well as the Syracuse Police. Now, DPS says the policy is likely to ban all drones for recreational use as well as place heavy restrictions on those used for both academic and research purposes. The non-recreational drone users will be required to have a special exemption from the Federal Aviation Authority as well as liability insurance for their drone. And once these requirements are met, flown dryers will need to notify SUNY Upstate Medical Center before flying, as drones cannot be flown within a 5-mile radius of manned aircraft. Back to you, Alex.
Thanks, Molly. I'm joined now by Kyle Foley, the president of the Skyworks Project, an all-student group that promotes both the recreational and academic uses of drones. Kyle, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So, my first question for you is, are the demands that the university is making regarding the use of drones, are they reasonable?
Well, on their side, it kind of makes sense. They're doing it for more of a safety standpoint. You know, they don't want people who really don't know how to fly to go out there, buy a drone, fly it on campus, and possibly injure someone. But the way they're going about it doesn't really make sense by completely banning drones. You know, the way that they're requiring liability insurance, which can cost thousands of dollars a year, and an exemption by the FAA just doesn't really make sense.
Now, Molly mentioned about how Syracuse has a reputation as a pretty prestigious research university. They invested quite a bit of money in drones. How does this policy look versus Syracuse's investment in drones? How does it come off to you?
Well, as an outside company willing to invest in a university that's researching drones, it doesn't really make sense. You know, it kind of turns them off from the idea. Mainly because why would you want to invest something where you're not going to be able to test it on campus here? That's kind of the point of having research facilities on campus. So to an outside investor, it doesn't really make sense to invest in something like that.
If these new regulations were to be enacted by the university, what would your group's response be?
Well, what we try to do is work with the university to alter the regulations to make it so to fly on campus you have to be part of Skyworks Project. And what we would do is train up the pilot. We'd make sure that they're flying to the proper FAA standards and our standards. And then we let them fly on campus.
Kyle, thank you very much for joining me. Troops have been being pulled from Afghanistan, but a Taliban resurgence may change that plan. Talking Points correspondent Thomas Viola has more.
Thanks, Alex. Over the past few months, the Taliban has made a major resurgence in the southern Afghanistan Helmand province. While United States forces have continued to pull out of the country, 500 troops have been ordered back into the region to relieve the 150 currently stationed there. The troops, coming from the Army's 287 Infantry Battalion, were originally supposed to deploy to Bagram Air Base this winter, but they will now be protecting the Special Forces operatives stationed in Helmand instead. These Special Forces soldiers have been training the Afghan Army's 215th Corps in the region, which has faced several setbacks while fighting the Taliban. According to the U.S.'s top commander in the region, Troop desertion and poor leadership have been chief among the 215's problems. Even with these issues and the incoming troops, the Army is not planning to increase the total troop count in the country beyond its current number of 9,800. Some, like outgoing NATO Chief General John Campbell, say this Taliban resurgence is due to the U.S.'s decrease of airstrikes and support in the region. Last month, retired General David Petraeus wrote an op-ed for the Washington Post echoing Campbell's statement, saying that to deal with the Taliban, the U.S. does not need to send more troops into Afghanistan, but it does need to be more aggressive with the ones that are already stationed there. Currently, the U.S. plans to do just the opposite. By the end of 2016, President Obama plans to have 3,300 more troops out of the country.
We'll be right back with news on the situation in North Korea. Don't go anywhere.
So who's going to do what?
I'll pack the dead batteries.
Great.
I'll only put what I don't need into a duffel bag.
Perfect. That's totally unhelpful.
No problem.
Meanwhile, I will try to comfort everyone by speaking in a calm voice. And who is going to handle supplies?
I can forget to do a list for us.
Thanks, pal.
We couldn't be any less prepared. I'm proud of you guys.
Talk to your kids about who to call, where to meet, what to pack. Search Ready Kids at nyc.gov or call 311.
Connor is struggling in school.
Finding lowest airfare to Istanbul.
Why don't you understand me?
I do. This is what it feels like for kids with learning and attention issues. Redirecting to understood.org.
Here with me to discuss Saudi Arabia and the UAE's decision to intervene in Syria and what that means for the international community's is Talking Points correspondent Zina Saifi. Zina, thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
So what's behind this decision to intervene in Syria by Saudi Arabia and the UAE?
Well, some people argue that it has to do with the fact that so many refugees are now fleeing to the border of Syria after the government and Russia seized control of Aleppo. But others would argue that there are other motives behind it. For example, before the decision was made, there were the Geneva talks that clearly failed, and Russia had a big play in that. Another thing is that after the decision was made, there is something coming up in Brussels where they're going to have talks about that. So some people say that that timing gives questions about their motives, what they're actually intending behind it, and it could be that they're trying to send a message to Russia that they want a ceasefire.
And so far, what's been the reaction from other international players with a stake in the Syria conflict?
So in Syria, they're saying, they literally said, and I quote, that if Saudi Arabia and UAE send their troops, we're going to send them back in coffins. And Iran was mocking them, saying that they're bluffing, they're not going to actually send in troops. Russia said that this would mean war. And I think most of them are saying that is because Saudi Arabia has been sending troops to Yemen for 10 months now. And they've been situated there, and they haven't done anything or shown any might with their military. So they don't think that their military is strong enough to actually pursue this decision.
And now, were Saudi Arabia and the UAE to militarily intervene in Syria, what would the effects be short-term and long-term on the conflict there?
I think, first of all, short-term, because now Aleppo has been seized by the government, that if this is actually a big thing for Saudi Arabia, the US, the allies, that Aleppo used to be the biggest economic city in Syria. So if the government takes control of that, that's going to have a sign that the Assad government is doing better, and that people are going to start saying that we should start supporting them. And that's obviously not something that Saudi or UAE want. So that's in the short term, that's going to cause a problem. In the long term, it's clearly a proxy war where you have Iran, Russia on one side, and United States, allies, Saudi Arabia on that side. So that could potentially lead to a really big problem, because they're all going to be fighting on one ground and with actual troops on the ground instead of just airstrikes.
Zina, thank you so much for joining me. Just 1 month after announcing that they had tested a hydrogen bomb, North Korea is back in the news for launching a missile. Here to tell us more about this is Talking Points correspondent Dan Prager. Dan, thank you for joining us.
Great to be here.
So, to be blunt, what's up with North Korea right now? What have they done now?
Well, on Sunday, Super Bowl Sunday and Chinese New Year, North Korea launched a missile into space. They said it was to launch a satellite. They said it was peaceful, purely scientific. But reports have come out from the U.S. that have said that the satellite doesn't work, it's not functional, and it was basically just an excuse to launch a missile. That's how a lot of the rest of the world feels. Now, the big issue with this, North Korea launches a lot of missiles. They do a lot of things that they're not supposed to. This missile has a range of 13,000 kilometers, which is enough to reach the continental U.S. People worry that if they could attach a nuclear warhead to it, that there is a possibility of a nuclear attack on the United States. North Korea is very unpredictable. We never know what will happen.
What's been the international response to the launch so far?
Well, pretty predictably, the rest of the world has said stop to North Korea. The UN Security Council called an emergency meeting. 8 separate nations, the UN, the EU, and NATO all have released written condemnations of these actions. However, it's really China who's really interested in what's going on right now. It has a big impact on them because they specifically said do not launch these missiles to North Korean leadership. And as a sign of defiance, they launched on the Chinese New Year.
Now, go a little more in depth about China, if you don't mind. What exactly effect is this going to have on the relationship between China and North Korea and China and the rest of the world?
Well, North Korea really only has one ally in the world, and it's China. They're really economically linked. If China stopped supporting North Korea, first of all, the rest of the world could come in and attack them for human rights violations. And also, there's economic reasons their economy would collapse without China. It's already not doing well as it is. Now, this just puts China under even more pressure to succumb to the rest of the world's stance to say North Korea is committing these human rights violations. They are a threat, and they need to be stopped. So it's just another event that makes China closer to the rest of the world's stance on North Korea. However, it's really interesting what happens between China and South Korea, because South Korea also feels very threatened by North Korea and their nuclear technology. And since that, they accepted a anti-missile defense system from the United States really recently since this attack has happened. China does not want these missiles on their doorstep, and they've had newly established relations between President Xi of China and President Park of South Korea that haven't really been seen in many years. And they were really starting to get along for the first time, and this is going to put a strain on that.
Other than the symbolism of the launching on the Chinese New Year, this launch seems pretty random. Why would North Korea do it now?
Well, the U.S. and UN say they just got the technology and want to test it, but there's a lot of other theories out there. Probably the most realistic one is that Kim Jong-un wants to appear strong. He's going to speak to his country in May, and he wants to feel like he is a strong leader, the supreme leader, and he is not losing control of his country. China is establishing closer ties to South Korea. They're breaking away from North Korea more. They're not having as many meetings with them. And also there's been a lot of purging of leadership in North Korea recently. You've heard it in the news a lot. But yesterday, another general, General Ri, was executed by North Korean leadership, by Kim Jong-un. So really, it looks like things are falling apart there, and Kim Jong-un really wants to appear like he has everything under control. He needs a political win.
Now, what comes next? In North Korea, in the rest of Asia, and the rest of the world, what comes next with this?
So really nothing good for North Korea. It's just another event that makes China say, well, we have to join the rest of the world. We have to side with the U.S. and the UN. So North Korea is trying to make this a political win in the short term. They're not really thinking about the long term. They're hoping that China will stay on their side forever. But in terms of like war or a nuclear attack, they don't have the technology. There were reports that they tested an H-bomb a month ago, but nobody's really sure if it's true. And even if it was, they believe that this missile couldn't reach the U.S. with that sort of payload. So there's no immediate threat of the United States right now, but it really causes people to worry that North Korea is getting there.
Dan, thank you so much for joining us. Coming up after the break, oil prices have reached a 13-year low. You're watching Talking Points.
So they say it's a man's world? I don't see anybody's name on it.
While they were doing their thing, we slowly changed ours.
Today, women can do anything men can do. And there's one thing we're even better at.
I grew up in the housing projects of Cleveland. I didn't even know that life could be any better than it was. Education for me has been a way to get away from the agony of what was normal life. I want to be able to impact the community, not just look back on where I came from, but to reach back to where I came from and pull some people up with me. My name is David, and I am your dividend.
How you doing? My name's Steve. My family's lived in this neighborhood for years. Recently, things got so tight, we had to go to our local food bank for help. I lost a lot of sleep worrying about what the neighbors might think. That is until I saw them there, too. How'd I do, Steve?
A little stiff. You could have done a little better.
What? Come on. You know, I have an Academy Award.
Yeah, but not for playing me.
Play a role in ending hunger. Visit feedingamerica.org/hunger and find your local food bank.
The price for crude oil has fallen for 6 straight days, reaching its lowest level since 2003. Here to explain why prices are dropping so fast and the effect it's having on the economy is Talking Points correspondent Sarah Nevin.
A barrel of oil normally costs around $100, but in the last 2 years, the price has plunged to just $26 and could fall to $25 in a few days, a record low. While gas prices have been down for consumers, this trend has its consequences. Several companies in American states have gone bankrupt, and at least 250,000 oil workers have lost their jobs. For companies still in business, earnings are at a record low, causing several to decommission more than 2/3 of their rigs and cut investment in exploration and production. The reason is simple supply and demand. U.S. domestic production has nearly doubled in the last few years, and Canada, Iraq, and Russia are pumping out more oil than ever. But with more energy-efficient cars on the road, there isn't as much demand. Now, many countries are nearing storage capacity, but production is starting to decline. RBC Capital Markets announced that the OPEC countries have canceled or delayed several of their projects in the last year. However, experts say this isn't enough to raise prices. Talking Points correspondent Galat Malamed is in studio to discuss what steps the U.S. is taking to address the plummeting oil price.
Now, Galat, President Obama is proposing an oil tax to sort of respond to this. What exactly is his plan with this?
So the tax it's a $10 tax for every barrel of crude oil, and what this amounts to is 25 cents more per gallon. And this tax will be the oil companies are going to be the ones paying this tax, but it's not going to hit them right away. It's going to be phased in over the course of 5 years.
And what kind of effect is that going to have on consumers at the pump?
So like Sarah was saying, the oil companies are really struggling right now, so they don't have the money to pay this tax. So this means consumers can expect to see higher prices at the pump, but not only that, the price of food and other goods are also going to go up too, due to the increased price of transporting these goods.
Now, what's the proposal to spend the new revenue from this gas tax? What are they proposing to spend this on?
So what they want to spend this on, Obama has his 21st century clean transportation system. So what this entails is he wants to improve our transportation system, specifically high-speed rails, and this would be an alternative to flying, which is more environmentally friendly. And he also wants to allocate the money to projects for self-driving cars.
So probably the most important thing about this, what are its chances in Congress? I know that Speaker Ryan has mentioned it's dead on arrival, but beyond that, what's some of the pulse about it?
Yeah, so he says it's dead on arrival, and the thing is, the main thing is the Democrats aren't really saying much about this. The Republicans are very angry. They say it's going to be detrimental to the economy, but it's not like the Democrats are even really supporting it. They're not really voicing their support for this. So without their adamant support, it's going to die on arrival, like Speaker Ryan said.
So in our final 30 seconds, what kind of effect can we expect this to have on the 2016 race?
So as of now, neither of the Democratic candidates have really said much about this. But the thing is, if they can address this, it'll be really interesting to see how this will help or hurt their vote. If they're in favor for this, they're definitely going to gain the environmentalist niche portion of Democratic voters. But the problem is this may lose some moderate Democratic votes for them because, like I mentioned before, the consumers are going to be the ones really paying for this tax.
Right. Galat, thank you so much. That's all the time we have for Talking Points this evening. Thank you for joining us. Check us out on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, as well as our blog. I'm Alex Amico. Good night.